We want you as the creator to own the business you're building from day one. We want you to own the customer relationship. We don't want you to build our business. We want to be a service provider while you're building your business.
Well, hey, friends, welcome back to The Christian Podcaster. As always, I'm your host, Eric Nevins. So grateful that you are here. The Christian Podcaster is the official podcast of Christian Podcasters Association. Hey, if haven't joined us already, you should do that on Facebook. Just search the group Christian Podcasters Association. And you can always go to ChristianPodcastersAssociation.com to find out everything that we do, including coaching and memberships and all kinds of ways that we can help you solve your podcasting problems. I'm excited about this conversation. I've been getting to know our guest today, and one of those things, right, that we all have questions about if you start a podcast is monetization. How do you monetize your podcast? What do you do? Is there a way? I hear this question probably every single week. Somebody asks me that question. How do I actually monetize my show? Well, we're going to talk today about why subscriptions are a really great way to go for any podcaster, how this particular platform is different, and then what's actually working with audiences right now. Our guest is the leading creator of partnerships at Supercast, where he unlocks millions in recurring revenue for their partners. Oh, and he runs ultras, which I assume means ultra marathons, in his spare time. Our guest is Josh Crist. Josh, welcome to the Christian Podcaster. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it is exciting to meet you. We've been kind of connecting over since podcast movement, I think, and just getting to know each other a little bit. I'm pretty sure I've got a Supercast sticker on my laptop somewhere. So I've been probably seeing you guys around for a while.
We won't tell.
It's all right. That's good. But it's good to hear kind of all about that. Now I gotta just go. Am I right about ultras? Like, tell me about. How did you get into that?
Yeah, it's a super funny story. So I've been an athlete my whole life, but never an endurance athlete. And 2.5 years ago, started kind of thinking about, okay, what would happen if I run? I think it really hit, during the pandemic. I said I want to, get out, but gyms were closed, didn't know what to do. So I started going for runs around my house. And one thing led to another, started going a little bit further and said, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if I could run, a half marathon. Did that and it felt pretty good. And I was like, oh, okay. I wonder if I could run the next thing up. And for whatever reason, decided to just jump right into ultras and not go for the marathon itself. So I did my first one back in September, had a blast. It was a 50K and have a couple of 50 milers planned for this year. So I'm excited.
Okay. Well, that's good. So I live in Colorado, and I like to make the joke the only reason I run is if a bear is chasing me. That's it. But that's okay. I really admire those of you who can do that, and not just like marathons, but long, a lot longer. What's the most challenging thing about doing that?
I think it's the mental piece of it. When you're running, no matter what the distance is, whatever level you're at running wise, you hit these points in a run where mentally and emotionally the bottom just falls out, right? And you get to the point where you start saying to yourself, why am I doing this? This is an awful idea. Stuff aches, stuff hurts, it's cold, it's rainy, it's whatever. You don't think you can finish, you've got a cramp, you're hungry, you're tired, you're dehydrated. I mean, there's a million thoughts that go through your head. And usually what happens is that cycle repeats itself in a race in some form or another. And you have to kind of learn how to push through it. And so I love running for that reason, because it kind of is a great training ground for those kind of moments. But man, when you're in those, what I would call dark nights of the soul in the middle of a race, it is brutal.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I think that probably mindset little nugget that you just gave us is worth the price of admission already, because mindset pieces like that as a cycle, I've never thought of that like that before, but you're probably right. We get into them. We have to know how to get out of a mind spiral, right? That happens to all of us as podcasters as well. Mindset is one of our key pillars in Christian Podcasters Association, because everything rests on that foundation, right?
100%. It ends up being, I think, the foundation for any kind of success you want to have as a creator, period. Right. I mean, there's going to be pieces of content, whether it's podcast interviews, whether it's pieces of promotional content you put out into the world, whether it's a new concept that, you think is going to stick, doesn't end up sticking. And if the only response you have when those kind of gremlins in your head get really loud is to just kind of shrivel and run away, you're not going to find success. So I couldn't agree more. I think you need to have that resilience and learn how to cultivate it.
It's the hardest thing for me to see when podcasters get started, especially if you started like I did with absolutely no audience, where like who was going to listen to it? 2016 was a different world too,
but grind.
Yeah, you have to just keep producing content in order to get discovered. And that can be discouraging for people, especially numbers people like who are wanting to see that up and to the right stuff. Sometimes you got to plateau, and that's just the way that it goes. Okay, I want to hear more of your backstory. So you're into ultra marathons. But where are you from, and like, how did you, how'd you get into kind of technology like this?
Yeah. So born and raised in Colorado. I grew up a little bit north of Denver, went to school at CU in Boulder, and then moved up to the northern Colorado area where I live now. Like I mentioned, been an athlete my whole life. And so I've been in and out of running different businesses, owned a martial arts studio with my wife for a little bit. And then we closed that down and got that kind of happened at the same time I got into the creator space. So I started hosting a podcast with a group of former pro athletes and coaches. Loved the medium. The podcast itself didn't make it, past, I think 80 or 90 episodes, but I absolutely loved the medium and really fell in love with what podcasting means. I remember I have this incredibly visceral recollection of being on a tarmac in China. My wife and I were on a trip to go train with the Shaolin monks, funny enough, the Wudong monks. We were out there training, and we're on a tarmac, and I'm listening to a podcast. I think it was Impact Theory. Tom Bilyeu was interviewing, I want to say Naveen Jain, who's the founder and CEO of a company called Viome. But anyway, the point, not so much what I was listening to, but I just remember in that moment sitting in the plane going, I want to do more with podcasts, whatever life has in store. I want to do more with this medium. So, fast forward a couple of years, I was in PR working with podcast creators to place guests and kind of work on the interview side of things. And then found Supercast and really fell in love with the idea of working closer on the creator monetization side and helping creators unlock the impact and revenue that I was seeing them, generate for the clients that I was working with and bringing to them. I wanted to kind of get to the creator side of this technology and this content.
I love that. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about Supercast, kind of what it means, how podcasters can use it. The one thing that I wanted to mention to you is I'd love to see you at one of the Colorado podcaster meetups coming up. So I don't know. I'll have to make sure I get you that invite, because usually they have one in Denver somewhere. I don't know if it's every quarter or a couple times a year, but that'd be really great. I think you'd meet a bunch of podcasters. It'd be fun. So
my kind of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the coolest time. It's one of the things about podcasting that I really love is that even though we all come from some really different places, different kind of things that we care about, different passions, maybe even different religious beliefs and all kinds of things, the podcasting brings us together as a thing that we all have in common. We all have to go through that common struggle to get something out. And it really is a neat community who wants to help each other because of that. So that's why I love to go to those things.
I've seen, pretty consistently through podcasting, one of the tighter communities out there, just in terms of a business ecosystem and a creator ecosystem. I think there's something very unique about what it takes to be successful as a podcaster that allows you to have maybe more empathy, more humility when interacting with other members of the community too, especially when they're up and coming.
Amen. I love that. Okay. Well, I want to talk about Supercast because you and I have been talking about it. You've been showing it to me, and I think it's pretty interesting. And as a way of monetizing, as a way of connecting also with your audience, which I think is pretty cool. So what is it? And then give us that kind of broad overview.
Sure. So Supercast fundamentally is a subscription and monetization platform and partner with to some of the biggest podcast creators in the world. That's where we got our start. We actually, our initial foray into subscription, Sam Harris, who's a large author, writer, podcaster, had built up a really big membership on Patreon at the time. This was 2019. I think he was the 4th or 6th biggest creator at the time on the platform, and ran into a host of challenges because Patreon, which is an incredible platform, just wasn't built for podcasters, right? It was built for every creator. And so, the first version of Supercast was built as kind of a custom answer to Sam's question of, hey, how do I grow beyond this thing that I have built? They had a successful Patreon, but felt like he could do more, could grow, could have better subscriber experience, better customer experience. And so we built the first version of Supercast for Sam, and it just took off like a rocket. And, you fast forward to today, our top 10 creators on the platform gross over 21 million annually just through subscription. So these are creators with, a range of different categories: news, politics, true crime, health and fitness, comedy. I mean, it's a really fascinating mix of shows. And then, on top of that, the thing that's been so powerful is we early on made a decision that, or heard from creators and really leaned into the idea that your audience as a podcaster has fundamentally already made the decision of where they want to consume your content, whether it's on Apple, whether it's on Spotify.
Yes.
They have a listening habit, right? They understand where they want to hear and see your content show up for them. And so fundamentally, Supercast from day one decided we're not going to be another app that your subscribers have to engage with. If you're going to deliver premium content to them and ask them to pay for it, we think you should be able, as the creator, to deliver that content wherever they're already used to getting that content from you. And so we built it from day one to be able to deliver that premium content wherever they already are. And, that was 2019. And here we are, almost 4 years later. It's been absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So it lowers the barrier to entry, right? Like, I think that was one of the things I've discovered with places like Patreon is let's go to Patreon or go to, even if it's a link, then I got to send you over to Patreon. So this is one of my questions that I had for later, but there's some advantages to that, right? For the podcaster, to have it kind of just built straight in.
Totally. One of the things that we think about philosophically is that, as creators grow their audience, we really want creators to be able to do a couple of things that are unique to Supercast, but really we think important to building a healthy subscription. One being, we think you should be able to remove as much friction as possible for your subscribers. So if you're asking somebody to pay you $5, $10, $20 a month for this premium bonus content, additional content that they haven't yet gotten from you, we want it to be an easy and enjoyable experience for them as podcast listeners, right? They're used to having a certain kind of experience within the podcasting medium. We want to make sure that you as the creator can deliver a similar experience to them. So that's really important. And one of the places where we've really tried to differentiate ourselves from, say, a platform like Patreon, which again, great platform, but it wasn't built for podcast creators, right? It wasn't built to be able to deliver this content natively the way we can. And then I think the other fundamental piece, and I know we're going to talk about this more as we dig into it, but we want you as the creator to own the business you're building from day one. We want you to own the customer relationship, the billing relationship. We'll help you with customer support. We'll handle all the technical questions that your customers and subscribers might have. But at the end of the day, we don't want you to build our business. We want to be a service provider while you're building your business. And that's really important. It's a very subtle distinction in terms of the philosophy there, but we found that to be critical to the kind of long-term success.
Right. I mean, it's subtle, but it's like, so critical is a great word. It's very important. It's kind of a different thing. So this is one of the things that I'm not sure is appreciated, but I like to talk about as much as I can, because it is foundational to the entire online platform business, right? For instance, we just had a post in another group, in our CPA Golden group, where somebody noticed that somebody was on TikTok and they had 4 million followers and they got kicked off, right? And they're complaining that they somehow have, now they've lost 4 million followers. But if you only had that one connection to your followers in that app, you did it wrong, right? Because fundamental audience building practice is, or whatever, maybe there's another better word for that, online something, but that is to send people to your website. So we do these kinds of things, but ultimately I want you on my email list. I want you in a place. I want to have that relationship with you that I own, that I control. And that is really important. And so that was actually one of the key things that when you told me it, that was like, oh, actually that resonates with me deeply, because I want to own and control those I want to own that relationship so that I am managing it and that it can become what I want it to become, not what the platform sort of dictates.
I think one of the The really interesting things that's happening right now in the creator space and podcasting especially is that I think more podcasters, more creators are waking up to the fact that whoever owns the wallet really owns the value of the relationship. And so whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitch, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Patreon, it doesn't matter. These platforms, what they've recognized for a long time is that they can own the wallet of that subscriber base that you're building for them and share that revenue with you in a sense, and make sure you're able to, to have access to it. But at the end of the day, because they own that underlying billing relationship with the customer, they really have total control over the business that you're building. And it's something that once you start to see it, it's really hard to unsee, right? Because you recognize that whoever has that billing relationship locked up can really make decisions about the business. They can leverage things around the business. They can scale in a way that just isn't possible for a creator when they don't have that direct access, at least, in our view. That's how we look at it.
Yeah. Okay. One other thing I want to highlight is in a world where it seems like companies don't care about customer service, right? Like where really I've heard so many horror stories. I had one last week and I just couldn't believe the customer service experience I was getting. I was just trying so hard to be nice. I was in customer service for like 15 years. I want to be nice to customer service people, but I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. Right, because companies don't seem to be thinking about their customers. So to hear something like, hey, we made a philosophical decision to actually build your business, it just delights me. I think it's really, really wonderful.
Well, and I would imagine, you've gone through this too, Eric, as a creator, right? You want to be able to give your customers the best possible experience for consuming the content. I mean, one of the amazing things about podcasting is that you can consume this content on the go, right? I'd say 95% of the podcasts I listen to, and I listen to them constantly, I'm doing something else when I'm listening to the content, right? I'm walking the dogs, I'm taking the kids to school, I'm doing groceries, I'm cleaning, I'm working on something else. And so we wanted really early on to figure out, how do you map that kind of experience to the same premium content, right? I'm paying you as a customer of yours. I'm paying you this monthly subscription or access for this content. I want to be able to have the same kind of experience around the podcast that I'm used to having, if not even more enhanced, because I'm a premium subscriber. So that's really critical to us, and how we think about customer support for you as the creator. Yeah, is really foundational to what we want to see.
Yeah, super powerful. Okay, so you kind of alluded to this a couple times, but the one thing that I want to know about is, what's the listener experience? So for my podcasters, they're going to care about, when I invite somebody to go ahead and get in on this, what's that like for their listeners?
Yeah. So like we said, at the start, we deliver premium content to wherever your listeners already are. So let's imagine they're on Apple, for example. The typical funnel that a subscriber will go through in terms of signing up for your premium offering will be, they'll hear about that call to action. They'll hear about your premium offering in an episode. Maybe you mention it. Maybe there's an ad read that you put in place to kind of promote the offering itself. Maybe they see it in the show notes, but they'll end up clicking on a link or going to your landing page, right? That you've been able to white label and brand. And then you're going to present them with what are the offers for your subscription. Maybe it's a single tier offer, $5 a month. Maybe it's 2 tiers, whatever, customization you want to put in place around the offer. But that's step one, is they hit your landing page. Step two is they're going to input their payment information once they choose which plan they want to subscribe to. And then, and this is really where the magic is, step three, we take the liberty of saying, hey, okay, you've signed up. Now, where do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen on Apple? Do you listen on Spotify? In this case, we mentioned an Apple subscriber. So we're going to say, hey, great, you're on Apple. We're going to take your premium feed that we created just for you. We're going to automatically send it back to Apple Podcasts, subscribe for you in that podcast player. So now, without doing any work, your subscribers in 3 steps have had the premium version of their content and their feed dropped right back into their podcast player. They're automatically subscribed to it, and they've already paid you for the experience. The subscription is set up. Now they can just consume the content the way they're used to.
Yeah. And then does it just charge them every month and it just goes on the same day?
Exactly. That's right. One of the things that, again, is a subtle distinction, but we think is pretty foundational to how customers are used to engaging with subscriptions. When you and I buy a subscription to a software product, right? Maybe, or to, it could be anything. It could be a food box, right? It could be, right. Any kind of subscription. We expect to be billed on the same day each month. That's how subscriptions work. one of the things that's different when you don't own the customer relationship, say an example, being Patreon, they might be billing your customers on the same, let's call it on a monthly cycle, but not the same day every month. So maybe the 5th of the month is when all of your customers get billed for that subscription. But if they signed up, on the 2nd of the month, they might have just paid and then they'd get billed again. So there's all these funny things and funky dynamics within the billing relationship for most of the premium content out there for a lot of creators that they aren't aware of because they don't own that relationship. So for us, it's super simple. If your customer signs up on the 17th of the month, that's the day that they'll be billed for as long as they're a subscriber.
Yeah, I think that's great. That is sort of meets the expectations, right? I think that's sort of the bar there. I love that. Okay. So I'm curious. We've talked about subscriptions, maybe levels, maybe different kinds of things like that. I know that a lot of people have tried something like a Patreon and been like, I don't know that this is, maybe they've had trouble either keeping up with content or creating something that was a little too hard to keep up with in addition to their podcasting content. What do you see that is working for people? What kind of things, what kind of subscription models can people create for their listeners that you see really works?
Yeah. So we have a pretty consistent playbook for this question. So, first and foremost, what we typically see across our top 20 creators, and we use that to inform the recommendations we make for any creator we work with, is that the average, top 5% of your audience on average will typically be able to convert into premium subscribers. So if you're getting 1,000 downloads an episode, if you're getting 100,000 downloads an episode, using 5% as kind of a benchmark is a good way to think about what's possible for my subscription. And the typical difference between a show and offering that might convert at 1 or 2% versus 5, 6, 7, or maybe even 10% or more, we have creators that convert over 15% of their audience, is the mix of benefits. And what that usually looks like is things like ad-free, early access, bonus content is usually a great thing to include. And the bonus content that we see performing really well on the platform might be something like an AMA, so an Ask Me Anything style question, where subscribers are submitting questions and you're answering a select group of them on a weekly basis or monthly basis. Maybe the bonus content is behind the scenes of what goes into making an episode. Maybe that bonus content is extended versions of the content you're already publishing. So there's maybe this concept of an uncut version, right? Where if you record for 90 minutes, but you only publish 45 of those minutes, maybe all 90 should go to premium subscribers.
Oh, wow.
And in terms of bonus content, that's net new content, right? Something that's never been produced before that you're thinking of as a new segment. What we see work really well for creators is very, what we would call low production content, right? So a lot of times when somebody becomes a subscriber, one of the things they want to do is just support you as the creator. They've gotten so much value from your free podcast for a long time. They want to support you. They want to help demonstrate that support, and they just want more access to your world typically. And so one of the great stories that I love to tell, we had a creator who, when she launched, she put a lot of energy into a couple different bonus segments. I mean, she was doing some incredible ideas of bringing together different partners and vendors to put together these really cool interviews and different concepts of new shows that would be for premium subscribers only. And when she launched, she didn't have the growth that she wanted and had to pull back some of that content because it wasn't sustainable. She was working really hard to try to produce extra content. And what was so interesting is she decided one day, well, what if I just open up my phone and record a little, voice memo about what I'm thinking about right now and just drop that in as a premium, voice memo from me to my premium subscribers, and they loved it. And so her offering became, hey, once a week you'll get a 15 to 20 minute just memo from me. It's a little thought on what's going on in my world. So that kind of bonus content we see perform really well, and typically it's content that gives the audience a sense of more access to you as the creator.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Access. So one of the things that people will pay for is access to the people that they are interested in, right? So the people that they are, if I'm following a podcaster, I want to get a little more in their world and hear more from them. Maybe unfiltered comments, things that aren't like, okay, I know that people talk a little bit differently when it's a little more closed. They don't feel like they're performing. It's a different kind of a thing. Let me give you a few thoughts, right? So I love that. I think that's really interesting, because a lot of the things that you've just said were kind of like that, even like an unedited version. Like, that's wild to me that people would pay for less work, right? Like, why would you do that?
One of the elements of podcasting that I love so much is that when you have spent, if you think about your listeners, right? If you have a show that's been around for a year or two, it's very likely your audience, especially that really top committed portion of your audience, has listened to you for hours, right? They've been in you've been in their head having conversations with them, or they've been a fly on the wall to the conversations you've been having for hours. And so one of the things that I think creators underappreciate is, because of that dynamic, oftentimes what I, as an audience member, want is just to hear a little bit more about how you think when it's not an interview, or when it's not the main mic on kind of moment. And that becomes a superpower for you as a creator, because you're right, it doesn't necessarily require you to come up with this crazy new concept of a show or bonus content. It just requires you maybe lifting the veil a little bit, right? Or dropping the editing mic for a moment and trying to give them a sense of, who is Eric beyond the 45 minutes or 60 minutes that I hear from him every week on this interview.
Yep. Right. Because we have to remember about that. You alluded to this earlier, the intimacy of the medium, right? I use the example all the time. Remember radio. If you're listening to radio and you listen to the same person every day on the way to work, and then you go, hey, like you have a picture of them in your head, and then you see a picture of them, it looks very different. It's because you've been imagining them, which is a very intimate kind of a connection in your head, right? So, it makes sense that people would want more of that person.
I love that example. And this is a funny one that isn't specific to podcasting, but it's totally, an example of what you're talking about. So I'm a CU Buffs fan. I went to CU. My parents both went to CU, and we've been loving the Dion stuff, right? And Coach Prime.
He's making a big splash here right now.
Big splash, right? And I've been watching the Coach Prime documentary and series on Amazon Prime. I grew up listening to Mark Johnson, who's the play-by-play caller for CU, right? Grew up listening to him. I've heard his voice thousands of hours on the radio, on TV, just forever, right?
KOA.
And so exactly. And so seeing him in a documentary, which is a totally different context, I go, whoa, this is really cool. This is a totally different way to experience this person who I've had, a intimate relationship with, in terms of listening to him describe something I love for a long time. Podcasting is the same way, and it doesn't have to be a brand new documentary in terms of giving them additional access. It just, you as the creator have to remember, I want to create a world where my audience can step into it a little bit more.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's like the quote of the episode right there, Josh. I want to create a world where my audience can step into it. That's so fantastic. Okay. Who do you see being successful with Supercast, and when is the right time in a podcasting journey to start it?
Yeah, this is a great question, because there are contradicting answers that I can give. So one of them being that, typically from an audience standpoint, if you were to come to me and say, hey, on a per episode basis, when does it make sense to really think about subscription? And if you're under 10,000 downloads an episode, we typically say, hey, you can have success, but when you hit that scale, that's where we really see subscriptions start to take off, and you can really build a healthy business that's 5-6 figures of recurring revenue. The flip side of that, which I love, is that one of our top 20 creators is a show that gets just a couple thousand downloads an episode. It's not big, and they have managed to convert nearly 50% of that audience into premium subscribers. And one of the things that's so compelling about that example is it really speaks to the offer you're creating for your audience. So the short answer, or I guess my long answer to the short question of who is it right for and when, is if you have a really clear understanding of who your audience is and what you can deliver to them that would be of value, and that the understanding feels just very timely and clear, really you can start at any point. There's certain points of scale where if you decide I want to make 10,000 through subscription, or 100,000 or 1 million through subscription, some of that is going to be a function of just the scale of your show, right? If your audience is only 100 people, it's probably going to be hard to make that much money. But if you have an understanding of what your audience needs, you can start right from day one. And we've had creators that launched their subscription the same day they launched their podcast and had tremendous success as a result too. So it's really about knowing your audience, I think, more than the answer being what size of show do you have or scale of your audience.
Yes. Boy, I love that. That's why I hammer all the time, guys. Know who you're talking to. Know what you're offering them. Know what they get by listening to your show. Know about the transformation that they want, need, and are going to experience by listening to you, engaging with you. that's what you got to do. And then if you can talk to them and get some of their language, learn what they want and the felt needs that they have, that's where you can create something else that you can actually, that they really, really want. Right. So that's
Absolutely.
so powerful. Okay. I'm interested. So a lot of the people in Christian Podcasters Association, either starting out or have smaller audiences, you said it's like 5% of your audience. So you got to measure that as a benchmark. But if you had a smaller audience, what would you recommend? So for somebody to like jump on, try Supercast and see how that would work for them.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd start with is what is your appetite as a creator for really investing in subscription? And the reason I would kind of reframe the question that way is because we always like to think about this, and we coach creators on this constantly, to think about subscription as years, not months, right? So when you launch something like a subscription, the creators that are having success aren't always having success on day one, right? This is something that takes months and months and months to build and really to compound over time, so that once you understand, hey, this is the offer my audience loves, and continue to grow your public audience and continue to focus on building that funnel and that acquisition channel, your subscription is going to grow right with it. So first question I would always ask the creators, are you thinking about this in terms of months or years? And if you're thinking about months, I would encourage you to wait until you really feel like, okay, now I can commit to this let's try it for a year and see what happens, right? So that's step number one. And once you've made that decision, then it just becomes a matter of, okay, how much bandwidth do I have and what kind of content do I want to experiment with or offer? Do I want to experiment with for my audience? What has my audience communicated to me? Have you heard from people that they, are really tired of hearing ads dropped into the middle of your show? That's a great example that ad-free might be compelling. Have you heard or do you get questions from your audience? Are they sending you emails, social media DMs? Are you getting what feels like this, being inundated with a lot of extra questions and requests? Maybe AMA is a great place to start from a bonus content standpoint, because you don't have to come up with new ideas. You just have to answer the questions that your subscribers are already sending you. That's where we typically like to coach creators through, is to start thinking, what's your audience telling you? Once you've made the decision to go in on subscription, what is your audience telling you? And I'm almost certain they're giving you signals of what kind of bonus content would be really compelling for them.
Yes. Okay. So once again, listen to your audience, friends. Like, listen to what they're saying. Listen to what they want. This is how everything hinges on that. I mean, like, this is all foundational. But what I love is that you guys have taken that and built this thing on top of it. Super cool. That is really great. Okay. I know I'm not one of the numbers guys, but I know my data heads are going to wonder, like, what kind of data do you get and how do you use it to kind of help you continue to build your subscription?
Totally. So like we talked about at the beginning, we want to make sure that you as the creator have as much access and visibility as you possibly can for what's happening in your subscription business. So you're going to be able to see things like monthly recurring revenue, or MRR. You're going to be able to see gross revenue, meaning just individual transactions in the revenue you've had. You're going to be able to see who's listening to what episodes. So how many episodes or how many downloads does a particular podcast episode get? How much engagement does a particular piece of content get? Well, what's your conversion rate look like from the public landing page to your actual subscribers? What does the churn rate look like for your subscription? Are you, is your churn where we would expect it to be, which is, in that 2 to 3% range? Or
tell people what churn is, because they may not be familiar with that.
Sure. So churn is the idea of how many people are leaving or canceling your subscription on a monthly basis, right? So if you're signing up, 10 people a month, how many of those people are staying with you over time on a monthly basis? And across Supercast, what we typically see is anywhere from 2 to 3, sometimes 4%, but 4 is really high in terms of across our entire platform. I think the last time we did a, kind of trailing 12-month average, it was right about 3.5% or something in that neighborhood. So, we're going to provide those kind of analytics to you, and also make sure, like I said, that you can understand, hey, who's listening to these episodes? Are they being listened to? Are people engaging with them? And if so, you have the ability to drill into who are the people that are listening to this? Who are the subscribers that are really engaging with the content too?
Right. And so we use the data to figure out who am I actually reaching, and then what do they want? What do they like? How can I make more of that? Right. I love those kinds of things. When I can make it practical like that, I like numbers. But if it's just a bunch of them, I'm like, my eyes crossed. But that's really good, important stuff. Okay. So the one thing we haven't talked about is how much does it cost, and how much,
Sure.
what does Supercast take? So we know that like, yeah, well, I guess we mentioned Patreon. Like, so Patreon takes something like 8% today, right? It's like, that's just so much. But then, okay, so how much does Supercast take?
Yeah. So again, this goes back to kind of a fundamental difference between most of the platforms out there that would allow a creator to offer subscription, and how we think about it at Supercast. So we don't charge a percentage of revenue. We charge a flat fee of 59 cents per subscriber per month. So when you launch on Supercast, if you are charging, $5 a month, $10 a month, or $100 a month, our platform fee is the same. So you pay 59 cents per subscriber per month. And then you've got, the Stripe transaction fees, which are 30 cents and 2.9% per transaction. But we built that pricing model on purpose because we want to make sure that you as the creator, as you scale your offering, as you scale your pricing, your tiers, you can take home more of the revenue that you're generating, because our offer and our platform hasn't fundamentally changed in terms of the value you're getting from us as you increase those different pieces. So we want to make sure you can take home as much of that revenue as possible.
Yeah, I love that. So that's the same kind of philosophical thing that we talked about. It was just one of the reasons I really am impressed by what Supercast does, because it's you're just paying a fixed fee, and then you guys get your cut out of that, and then we can use Stripe. And like, friends, if you're a little intimidated by Stripe, let me tell you, I was for like months one time. Like, I was just like, I don't know how to do it, right? It took me 15 minutes to set up and have it connected to my website. It was super easy because they want to make it easy for you to do it too, right? Like, that's just how it goes. So it's not that bad. And I'm sure it'll take just a few minutes to get going. Okay. Josh, I really love this. I'm really interested in this, and I know I've got plans actually for how I can use Supercast for maybe this podcast, but definitely one that I've got coming up that I'm excited about. So that would be great. People can learn more, obviously, supercast.com. We also have a CPA affiliate link, friends. Do you know what affiliates are? Affiliates are like, if you use my link, then that sends a little bit of your revenue back toward Christian Podcasters Association, so that we can kind of help keep running as well. So if you're interested, hit me up. I'll go through and I'll post that link underneath all of these videos across the fruited plain that is the internet as well. So I love it, Josh. I want to give you the last word on this recording anyway. What do you want to leave us with about kind of what this means for podcasters?
Yeah, so first off, this has been a blast, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I've had a lot of fun and always love having these kind of conversations. I think the most important thing for creators to be thinking about right now, and podcasters in particular, is just how do you continuously learn and build a world where you own that direct relationship with your audience, monetization wise, and also just in general. Don't be beholden to platforms. Figure out how to build a business that is truly directly connected to your subscribers and your customers. And if you do that, you're going to be okay. Because I think more and more that's where the world is heading. And I wish more creators would kind of fundamentally think about it through the lens of, do I own this relationship or not? And if I don't, is there a way that I can? And if so, that's where I should be focused.
Perfect. I love it. Thanks, Josh.